London is the capital of the United Kingdom and one of the wealthiest cities in the world. Its economy alone is worth more than $500 billion, large enough to rank among the top 30 economies globally if it were an independent country. For nearly 2 centuries, London has acted as a financial and professional services hub, offering some of the highest wages in Europe and attracting talent from across the globe. Yet beneath this image of prosperity lies a starkly different reality. In 2023, local councils estimated that more than 1 in 50 people in London were experiencing homelessness. This figure has increased by over 50% in just a decade, giving the UK one of the highest homelessness rates in the developed world. At the same time, real wages, income adjusted for inflation, have barely changed since 2008, meaning many workers earn no more today than they did 15 years ago. While wages stagnated, the cost of living surged. Housing prices in particular have skyrocketed, making basic living increasingly unaffordable for large parts of the population. As a result, a growing number of people are leaving the UK altogether. A junior professional, for example, can often earn more than twice as much in New York as in London, while facing a cost of living increase of only around 30%. This growing gap has triggered a steady outflow of young, skilled workers. The impact is especially visible in sectors such as healthcare. Britain's National Health Service is facing a potential exodus of doctors and nurses, driven by low pay, excessive workloads, and deteriorating working conditions. The movement of people out of the UK has become a metaphor for the broader state of the British economy. Ironically, while more people are leaving the UK than ever before, immigration into Britain has also reached record levels. Many migrants arrive to study or work, particularly drawn by the UK's globally respected education system. However, research has shown that those leaving the country tend to be significantly more skilled than those arriving. This imbalance increases the supply of low-skilled labor while shrinking the pool of highly productive workers. Such a shift has long-term consequences. Replacing skilled workers with lower-skilled labor reduces productivity and lowers the overall quality of goods and services across the economy. This raises an important question: how can a country that appears wealthy on the surface be losing so many of its most talented and ambitious citizens? One major reason is the steady decline in living standards. For many Britons, life in the UK feels worse each year. If London's population and economic output were removed from national statistics, living standards in the rest of the UK would fall dramatically, to a level below that of the poorest US states. This trend is supported by long-term data. In 2007, the average UK household was only slightly worse off than households in northwestern Europe. 15 years later, that gap has widened to record levels. If current trends continue, households in countries such as Slovenia and Poland are expected to surpass British households in terms of living standards. Stagnant wages have hit lower income groups particularly hard. While Britain's top earners still enjoy relatively high living standards, average households lag behind their European peers, and the poorest households fare even worse. In some cases, the lowest income British households now have a weaker standard of living than comparable groups in Eastern Europe. This creates a paradox. As migration into the UK increases, public services deteriorate and skilled labour becomes scarcer. These pressures raise serious concerns about the long-term direction of the British economy and help explain why so many people are choosing to leave. To understand why the UK has reached this point, it helps to look back to a period many Britons now view with nostalgia. Surveys consistently show that a majority of people believe life in Britain was better in the 1990s and early 2000s. This perception is not purely emotional. That era coincided with a genuine period of economic success and optimism. Following a difficult start to the 1990s, marked by recession and the collapse of the UK's membership in the European exchange rate mechanism, Britain entered its longest uninterrupted period of economic growth since World War II. From 1992 onward, the economy expanded steadily, supported by structural reforms, stable monetary policy, and favorable global conditions. This period, often referred to as the long expansion, was characterized by rising productivity and growing household incomes. The financial sector played a central role, as credit expansion and rising property values fueled consumption and investment. Regulatory changes also helped attract foreign capital, allowing the UK to maintain a positive net income from overseas investments. However, this growth came with trade-offs. Britain continued shifting away from manufacturing and heavy industry toward a service-based economy. While profitable, this transition did not replace the broad employment base once provided by industrial jobs. Many of the jobs lost were concentrated in poorer regions outside London, widening regional inequality. By the mid-2000s, cracks in the economic model were already forming. The financial crisis of 2008 exposed deep structural weaknesses, including over-reliance on financial services and underinvestment in other sectors. When the crisis hit, it magnified problems that had been building for years. Today, the UK faces a convergence of long-term challenges. Public services are under strain, infrastructure is aging, and housing affordability has reached crisis levels. These issues are not isolated failures but the result of decades of policy decisions that prioritized short-term gains over long-term resilience. Housing has become the most visible pressure point. Britain simply does not build enough homes to meet demand, particularly in England. Strict planning laws, limited public investment, and decades of underbuilding have created a severe supply shortage. As population growth continued, housing costs surged far beyond wage growth. Government policies have also played a role. The Right to Buy scheme, introduced in the late 1970s, allowed tenants to purchase public housing at discounted prices. While it expanded home ownership, it also led to a massive reduction in social housing stock. These homes were never replaced at scale, shrinking the social housing sector by roughly a quarter. As social housing declined, more households were pushed into the private rental market. Increased demand drove rents higher, disproportionately affecting lower-income families. At the same time, house prices continued to rise faster than wages, widening the gap between those who own property and those who do not. This imbalance has produced less visible forms of homelessness. The number of households placed in temporary accommodation has more than doubled since 2010, reaching record levels. Many of these families live in overcrowded, poorly maintained conditions, facing frequent relocations that disrupt employment and education. These conditions impose enormous social and financial costs. Local councils now spend billions each year on emergency housing, diverting resources from long-term solutions. The instability caused by temporary accommodation reduces social mobility and entrenches inequality across generations. Housing pressures also fall unevenly across age groups. Older generations are far more likely to own property, often multiple homes, while younger adults face long-term renting with little prospect of ownership. This generational divide reflects a broader economic reality in which asset values rise while wages stagnate. For younger workers, slower economic growth also limits career progression. Many now earn less at the same age than their parents did, reversing a long-standing expectation of upward mobility. Faced with high costs and limited opportunity, emigration becomes an increasingly rational choice. One of the deepest forces behind Britain's stagnation is weak productivity growth. Productivity measures how efficiently an economy turns labor and capital into goods and services, and it is the single most important driver of long-term wage growth. In the UK, productivity performance has deteriorated sharply since the global financial crisis. Before 2008, British productivity was growing at roughly 2% per year. After the crisis, that growth nearly flatlined. Over more than a decade, this slowdown compounded into a massive loss of potential income. Had productivity continued at pre-crisis rates, average wages would be significantly higher today. A major reason for this slowdown is chronic underinvestment. Since 2005, British companies have invested around 20% less than firms in the United States, France, and Germany. This places the UK near the bottom of OECD rankings for business investment, leading to outdated equipment, slower innovation, and weaker skills development. Underinvestment affects both manufacturing and services. Aging infrastructure, limited adoption of new technologies, and insufficient training all reduce efficiency. Over time, this erodes competitiveness and suppresses wage growth across the economy. Nowhere are these pressures more visible than in the National Health Service. The NHS, founded in 1948, was designed for a younger and smaller population. Over time, demographic change has dramatically increased demand, while medical advances have raised costs. Waiting lists have grown sharply. The number of people awaiting consultant-led treatment more than doubled in the 9 years following 2014. Survival rates for major illnesses such as cancer, heart disease, and stroke lag behind many comparable countries, reflecting capacity constraints rather than lack of effort. It is tempting to attribute these outcomes solely to underfunding, but the picture is more complex. NHS funding has increased significantly in recent years, and staffing levels have also risen. Despite this, outcomes have not improved at the same pace. The reason lies in rising costs. An aging population requires more care, new treatments are expensive, drug prices are higher, and inflation has pushed up wages and operating expenses. These pressures consume much of the additional funding, leaving little room for long-term investment in capacity and modernization. As a result, the NHS is stuck covering day-to-day costs rather than building for the future. This pattern mirrors broader infrastructure challenges across the UK, where maintenance crowds out expansion and renewal. Transport provides a clear example. Major infrastructure projects in Britain are often slower and more expensive than in peer countries. The HS2 high-speed rail project illustrates this problem. Originally proposed in 2009, construction began only in 2020, by which time costs had nearly tripled. The project was eventually abandoned, leaving little to show for years of planning and expenditure. Brexit has further complicated these challenges. Leaving the European Union reduced trade with the UK's largest market and added friction to supply chains. While Brexit is not the sole cause of Britain's economic difficulties, it has amplified existing weaknesses and reduced growth potential. Britain's current brain drain reflects the cumulative impact of these forces. Stagnant wages, high living costs, limited housing, and strained public services combine to push skilled workers abroad. Other countries offer higher pay, better housing prospects, and clearer paths for career advancement. Looking back, the economic success of the 1990s was built on choices that prioritized short-term growth over long-term resilience. Privatization and financial expansion delivered immediate gains but often came at the expense of sustained investment in infrastructure, housing, and productivity. Today, the consequences of those decisions are becoming unavoidable. Even with potential political change, reversing decades of underinvestment will take time. Until living standards improve and opportunity expands, the outflow of young and skilled workers is likely to continue. The growing exodus of young and skilled workers is not just a social trend, it is an economic warning signal. Countries that lose their most productive population groups often struggle to maintain growth, innovation, and public services over time. Britain is now entering that risk zone. Historically, each generation in the UK could expect to earn more and live better than the one before it. That assumption has quietly collapsed. Those born in the 1980s, for example, have generally earned less by their early 30s than the generation that preceded them, adjusting for inflation. This reversal is deeply corrosive to social trust. When education, hard work, and experience no longer translate into higher living standards, people begin to look elsewhere. For many British professionals, that elsewhere is the United States, Australia, Canada, or New Zealand. The contrast is stark. In cities like New York or Sydney, skilled workers often earn significantly more while facing only moderately higher living costs. Housing remains expensive abroad, but ownership feels achievable in a way it no longer does in much of Britain. At the same time, Britain continues to attract large numbers of migrants. While immigration itself is not inherently negative, the composition matters. Studies show that those leaving the UK tend to be more highly skilled than those arriving, gradually reducing average productivity and placing further strain on public services. This creates a paradox. The UK is richer than ever in absolute terms, yet poorer in lived experience for a growing share of its population. London remains a global financial hub, but outside the capital, many regions struggle to generate high-value employment or retain talent. Public services amplify this divide. Declining service quality affects lower-income households most, while wealthier groups can often compensate through private healthcare, education, and housing options. Over time, inequality becomes entrenched rather than temporary. The housing crisis sits at the center of this dynamic. Without a dramatic increase in construction and reform of planning laws, affordability will continue to worsen. Housing shortages ripple outward, raising rents, increasing homelessness, and reducing geographic mobility for workers. Productivity cannot recover without investment. Businesses need incentives and stability to invest in technology, skills, and infrastructure. Without this, wage growth will remain weak regardless of labor shortages or population growth. Political change alone cannot reverse these trends quickly. Even with better policy alignment, rebuilding infrastructure, restoring public services, and raising productivity are multi-decade projects. The gap between Britain and its peers did not emerge overnight, and it will not close overnight either. What makes the current moment different is scale. The pressures facing the UK are no longer marginal or cyclical. They are structural. Housing, healthcare, productivity, and migration are now interlinked in ways that reinforce decline rather than offset it. If Britain fails to address these issues, the consequences will be lasting. A shrinking skilled workforce, declining public services, and weaker economic growth would make recovery increasingly difficult. The country would risk locking itself into a lower growth, lower opportunity future. But decline is not inevitable. Britain still has deep capital markets, world-class universities, global cultural influence, and a strong legal system. These advantages remain powerful if paired with sustained investment and long-term planning. The real question is not whether Britain can recover, but whether it is willing to make the structural changes required. Until living standards improve and opportunity becomes tangible again, the outward flow of talent will remain a rational choice for many. And that is why so many people are leaving the United Kingdom.